some of these big retailers, these big brands are in trouble, right? People aren't, the discretionary money is, it's not flowing around like it was.
Yep. And then the other thing that you have is that Trump just appointed a new chair to the Federal Reserve, Warsh. And he's more conservative, but let's be honest, Trump is going to appoint who he has discussed cutting rates with.
Oh, yeah. I mean, yeah, we knew this was coming, right? He
Yeah.
just was throwing Powell under the bus as much as he could. No, those two, which is interesting because he appointed them.
Right. Well, I was going to say the same
Yeah.
thing could happen with Warsh,
Yeah.
right?
Oh,
Because
trust me.
one thing Trump hates is he can't fire these people after he appoints them. So
All he can do is badmouth them in the press, right?
Yeah.
Which is why his ratings are low. He wants rates low. And if the guy doesn't deliver, you watch, the gloves are going to come off, and it's going to be very interesting to see the battle between these egos.
So we also have to look at the Treasury and bond market because those really do also drive interest rates. Now, I know everybody thinks that the rates are completely detached from the Fed and they're completely dependent on the bond market. But the truth is last year, every time the Fed lowered rates, lending rates went down. So, yes, they're tied to both, let's say. But the bond market is important because even if the Fed lowers rates, the bond market has to cooperate.
That's right. Yeah. And again, the Fed, they have a dual mandate. Of course, we've already talked about this, but one is inflation and two is unemployment, right? So that's what they use typically. And don't forget, there's, 13 governors, I think, that are underneath the Fed, and they all vote. And so there's some really, really cool things that you can look at. Number one is there are notes that each Federal Reserve bank has, and I've read these, and they're fascinating. Actually, they focus on their geographical area, and this is why I think I don't think there's corruption inside of the Fed. Personally, I think what happens is you have each person comes there and they're looking at their geographical area, and there's these Fed notes. They're very, very, very cool. That all rolls up to what's called a dot plot. The dot plot basically says this is how the different governors are going to be. Is it governors or chair? I can't remember, but how they all vote. And essentially, and it kind of shows you where their head is, right, based on their particular region. Because what's in Kansas City is very different from San Francisco and very different from Philadelphia, and you guys kind of get the point. Very different from Dallas. So every person comes with their own perspective, which is, I think, a good thing. And so the chair, while they're still the chair, they also have to deal with the whole committee. So this is not something that and of course we are supposed to be completely independent. The president is supposed to be completely independent of the Fed.
Now, the biggest thing, though, is that in the past, the Fed has done some kind of quantitative easing where they're buying those mortgage-backed securities. Now, I don't know if Warsh is going to do that, but Trump has already put Fannie and Freddie in the position to start doing that. The thought of him mentioning it had already lowered rates, right? So if they actually start buying mortgage-backed securities, obviously that helps, get rates down as well.
And let's talk about how we got here, right? Because, Fannie and Freddie got in trouble in 2008. So, Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae, as you guys know, they're not nationalized, but the government bailed them, and then they fixed themselves, and they ended up getting quite a bit of money on their balance sheets, and so they were highly profitable. And Trump saw that cash. He's like, okay, 100 billion each. You're going to start buying these mortgage-backed securities. And what that did is it drove rates down. And by the way, let's take a look at this. There's a lot of people that are refinancing right now.
Mm-hmm.
And it helped.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, you and I both did refinances. We just did a refinance on a big project in Flagstaff, a 267 unit project. You did a refinance on a property that you have a lot of equity in. You pulled some equity out, right?
Yeah, and I'm waiting. I think a lot of people are also waiting on other properties. I have one that's at 6.9%. Doesn't make sense to refinance yet, but if rates can get into the mid fives, then it does make sense for me to refinance into a lower payment.